Oh, man. Huge missed opportunity. I should have had some great Styx music playing for our Grand Illusion video. John, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well, but I'm not sure there's such a thing as great Styx music. I think there's
Oh, I like
Styx
Styx.
music. You like? I think I saw one of their concerts, and that was
Yeah, Mr.
that
Roboto.
no,
Come
that was the
sail
end of
away.
Styx. Yeah, no, the artwork is phenomenal. I think
Yeah,
you can
thank you.
probably start an NFT auction right now, and by the end of the show, this could be millions, and according to the
The
NFT world, yeah.
NFTs haven't done that
So
well for crowdsource the truth. There was just
this one,
somebody who
this would
got
be a
dinged.
record setter. This is special. This is special. So
Thank you.
I'm looking forward
Let
to
me
this show.
and let me point something out to you. I mean, people who are not familiar with I think it was in the late 70s, Grand Illusion came out. It was one of the biggest records at the time from Styx. But it's like some woman's face or something hidden on this like unicorn or whatever it is. But now we got B-Rock, Barry
Indeed.
Sortero. Did you get a chance, John, to see this speech that he was giving at Stanford University maybe yesterday?
I didn't get to watch it. I heard a lot about it, and we're going to explore it. But I have not listened to it beginning to end now.
I definitely
It must
encourage
be
you
interesting.
and our other viewers to watch it because, frankly, getting a lecture from B-Rock Obama about disinfo is like Chris Christie telling you got to go on a diet because wait a minute, dude is the biggest liar in the world. And we've got to be very careful about what we discuss here on YouTube because the thing that Obama said that was correct is that we're living in a very dangerous time. And I don't want people to listen to what we say and think, okay, Jason said this or John said that, so that's the thing. I'm hopeful, John, that we're encouraging people to approach anything that they hear from any source, us, the news, Fauci, Obama, whoever it might be, with a high degree of skepticism, to demand evidence for every claim. And the tricky thing that the sinister B-Rock Obama did at that Stanford University speech is that he makes certain statements that are foregone conclusions for which we have seen no actual evidence. Like he was pinned hard on this, Putin disrupted the 2016 election and that's how we got Trump. But anybody who doubted the 2020 election, that's disinfo, obviously.
It's interesting, the double standards. Well, it's not just the former president. It turns out that the Grand Illusion is so many things here. We're looking at my investigative journalism career, so to speak, began with the Las Vegas shooting. And from there, sort of took a path into Al-Qaeda and some of the findings that Phil Haney had. And then we see, the final report on Phil Haney's death and how that's ruled as suicide. Right.
Yeah.
And so the Grand Illusion, right? So there's so many pieces of misinformation, disinformation. And it's interesting, why is the former president so worked up about this stuff?
I think I know why.
I think I know why too. I think it's because people like us aren't going to let the Phil Haney official narrative rest. Because as far as I'm concerned, this is nonsense. And I'm eager to speak to people that know him and to speak to his former fiancée.
Well, Laura Loomer worked with him quite a bit, and I agree with what you're saying, John, but, I am going to reveal something on today's, oh man, and I just realized I forgot to do something that you wanted me to do. We'll address that in a minute, but I'm going to reveal some information on our sponsor-exclusive show that's going to start in just about 25 minutes on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen. Patreon.com/IamJohnCullen and Subscribestar.com and Patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And it's not just some opinion statement that I'm going to blurt out. I think people know that Crowdsource the Truth, myself personally, and everybody who appears on Crowdsource the Truth, including you, have been subjected to a wide range of social engineering tactics and all kinds of malicious crap for the past 5 years. We also know that there is a huge thing going on right now where everybody is paying loads of attention to Elon Musk and what he may be planning to do with regard to purchasing Twitter. It's pretty baller to just roll up and slap down the $40 billion and load that Twitter into the trunk of your car. You're going to need a lot of twine to, keep the trunk secured. But I think there is an extremely important connection between Barack Obama, Twitter, and this entire media push to villainize so-called disinformation. Forget about how we're going to arrive at the conclusion that something is factual or counterfactual. We're just going to arbitrarily label it disinformation, and then that's it. It's banned. We're going to talk in detail on Subscribestar and Patreon on information that I have developed, mostly in the course of doing research for all my lawsuits that people have heard about that I think is going to blow people's minds. And every day, this hypothesis has been getting stronger. But John, I know you have a lot of stuff prepared for us, so let's get into talking about some of the things people are going to see this afternoon. But before we do, I want to make sure that people are subscribing to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. We've got a simulcast happening right there. And it's also important that people check out some of these alternative platforms because, with all this talk about disinformation, I think people know what's coming, and it's deplatforming, right?
We've been jumping across the backs of those alligators now for how many years? I mean, since I started, right? So my first channel was deplatformed. You're on channel number what? 27?
Crowdsource the Truth 5. But we've got Odyssey.
Yeah.
I think we need alternate platforms, right? So Odyssey.com, people can subscribe on there. This is a great platform for people to subscribe to because it's blockchain based and it's got a lot of the Crowdsource the Truth videos that have been kicked off of other platforms. That's a good way for people to stay in touch. And we have the simulcasts happening there.
I love it. Well, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, the famous Philadelphian kite flyer, who said, whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech.
Really?
And that's what Benjamin Franklin said. And, they say he knew a thing or two, right? So that's what they say. So, no. But famous kite flyer. Very famous kite flyer.
He also said that beer is proof that God exists and he wants us to be happy. Patriot, brewer. But Getter is another platform that people can see us on. It's amazing, John. We need for American citizens to visit Chinese and Russian-owned social media platforms in order to, be able to exercise free speech. It's a disgrace.
Well, what can I say? Tonight's show for our patrons, there's going to be probably as big a reveal as I've ever had. I made 2 big reveals in the last 2 weeks. And on this show, we're going to talk about not only the grand illusion, but we're going to talk about an illusion that Jason has helped me pull off. And I'm going to reveal that for our patrons when we get to our patron-only show. So if you guys are patrons at Crowdsource the Truth, Subscribestar, or Patreon, or I Am John Cullen, Patreon, Subscribestar, there's a huge reveal coming. In fact, I can show you guys a little bit if we go to our deck.
The biggest reveal.
I think
Got
so.
nothing.
I think what I'm going to be sharing tonight with our patrons is the biggest reveal that I've had so far. Yeah. And it's something that and we'll get into it deeper when we get into the show, but I think it's pretty significant. So why don't we go to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Last couple shows, I keep talking about April and how April of 2019, April of 2020 were kind of life-changing months. April of 2019 is when Jason came to Thailand. April of 2020, a whole bunch of things happened. So let's go to the next slide and let's just sort of review what we've covered in the last week or two. So April 2019, Jason comes to Thailand. April 2020, I speak to Laura Ingraham for the first time. So that was about 2 years ago this week. All right. So 2 years ago this week, give or take, I speak to Laura for the first time, and then shortly thereafter for the second time. And I'm revisiting all this stuff as I'm working on the book. And so as I'm reading and rereading these emails, it's kind of wild because it's like exactly 2 years ago. And the other thing that happened was in April 2020, the field hospitals are deployed across the United States for 10 days. And then they're put away. That's kind of weird, given that the COVID pandemic hasn't ended. And it was
new back then.
Well, somewhat new in April 2020, and we had more people dying in subsequent months than we did in April of 2020. So if that's the case, why didn't we put them away? All right, so we go to the next slide. No, in April of 2019, I reveal a bombshell or two to Jason Goodman. And tonight, for the first time on YouTube, I'm going to be sharing what I shared last week with our patron audience. So our patron-only audience last week learned something pretty significant. This week, I'm going to share that with our YouTube audience slowly, not like on the next slide, so don't blurt it out yet. But when we go patron-only tonight, I'm sharing the biggest thing of all. All right, so this is the pièce de résistance. This is the first two. We're kind of a build up to this next one. All right, so let's go.
Before we go to the next slide, John, we've got a commenter with us on YouTube who made a point of saying that he or she has been listening on VK.com and that you don't get censored there. Crowdsource the Truth has been on VK.com for years. And you can get simulcasts and live streams there. I'm not that active in the social media community here. It's just so many things for me to keep track of. But again, it is interesting that a site hosted in Russia has more respect for the First Amendment than any American social media company that we're aware of.
It's very popular with the Russian community. They use it kind of like Facebook.
Right.
I know it's very, very popular. All right, so I share this story with Jason, and tonight we're going to go into the third part of it. Well, big piece of this has to do with Bill Gates, and the reason is that Bill Gates, at the time of the Las Vegas shooting, was a 45% owner of the Four Seasons, and the Four Seasons was the hotel upstairs from Mandalay Bay that nobody mentioned, that no footage was shown. Well, a tiny bit of footage was shown, and that was it. So it was like, well, why is the Four Seasons getting the royal treatment here? Why is the Four Seasons getting, hushed? Nobody's mentioning it at all. Why did that happen? Well, now Bill Gates owns about 3/4 of the Four Seasons, right? So he just purchased this big portion of it from Halloween. Let's go to the next slide. So what the audience heard 2 weeks ago is that I actually had sort of a business relationship with the Four Seasons in Thailand, and I did it as a captain, and I took people out to these islands. The audience sees the islands, right? The audience can see the islands.
Yeah.
So this is where I would take people, and this was how I got to meet these Russian multimillionaires at the time. This was one way, and you go to the next slide. You guys will see another picture from the same venue-ish. So this is like a set of islands, and I would take people here to go snorkeling and to go fishing, and this was my job, so to speak, right? And the Four Seasons was my biggest client. Well, if you go to the next slide, you get another perspective here. So to me, this was the appeal of Thailand.
Super nice.
Oh, it's magnificent. I mean, it's as pretty a place as you're.
These are all photos you took?
No, these are stock. I'll tell you when you get to my photos. So the next picture is the Four Seasons Hotel. And
Oh,
this
right.
is, all right, so this is the Four Seasons Hotel in Koh Samui. And the next picture is another picture of it. And what the audience found out last week, our patrons, that our YouTube audience is about to learn right now, is that I didn't just run the boat and do the boat trips. What our patrons learned last week, yeah, you can show this photo. So what our patrons learned last week, maybe zoom out and get that whole shot in there. There you go.
What is that, whiskey tasting?
I think that's rum. That's a picture I took. So that's the Four Seasons in Koh Samui.
Looks great.
And I kind of worked my way into being the photographer at the Four Seasons. So I was working for Bill Gates and Awaleed bin Talal at the time that I was publishing videos about the Las Vegas shooting. And I was publishing the videos from the premises of the Four Seasons.
They love that.
So I was waiting for the FBI to show up at reception any day. I'm like, knock, knock, knock. Is this Cullen guy here? We need to talk to him. And I just figured, any day now it's going to happen. So this was the big reveal last week to our patrons who learned this. This week, YouTube audience is learning this. So I worked at the Four Seasons for Bill Gates, for Awaleed bin Talal, so to speak, as a photographer. And this was how I gained the skills necessary to use Lightroom to analyze the still frames that I was getting from the video clip. So I was able to work with, contrast and black levels and white levels and things like that, and find these, pixels of light moving across the screen that otherwise you might not be able to find. As a foodie, how does this?
Yeah, this looks amazing. I mean, this is like scallops or something. I want to eat that.
Yeah.
Quail eggs.
These guys are good. They're really good.
This is like $80 just for this. Probably more.
I wouldn't doubt it. But again, it's exquisite. Everything these guys do is exquisite.
Yeah.
And I'm just taking really pictures of it. Yeah. They're really good.
Did they were you able to eat this stuff?
Yeah.
That's
after you take a picture of it, yeah.
How did that taste?
Everything is amazing. It's so good. The pastry chef there is a young guy. I think he was from Colorado or something, and 28, 29 years old, something like that. It was phenomenal.
Oh yeah. Now we remember this from last time.
Right. This was I think only the patrons saw this, so the YouTube audience didn't see this. So this is Miss Universe Russia. And she was there as the guest of the guy you'll see in the next picture.
That watch costs more than my car.
Yeah. So again, I have the copyright to these photos, right? I took these photos, so I am the rightful copyright owner, as are the subjects in the photos. So this is the guest, and she's Miss Universe Russia, and the next picture is him with his bodyguards who are spent.
Right.
And these guys were just a riot. They were a riot. So again, it's like a whole different lifestyle. You have to see a guy traveling with his girlfriend and 2 bodyguards full time staying at the Four Seasons. So that was the big reveal last week. This week's reveal for our patrons will be even bigger as we get to our patron only hour. But I did want to talk about this commitment that the U.S. made to Ukraine. I think of something like $800 million and another 500 million worth of missiles or something like that. But I wanted to compare that amount to the amount that we spent on opening the schools safely.
Oh, right.
So we sent the Ukraine $800 million, and we spent $130 billion to safely reopen the schools.
Seems like a lot.
Well, if you were to say, well, how much do you guys really care about what's happening in Ukraine?
Well, a
By
lot less than
comparison,
school, I guess.
it
Yeah.
seems that way. It seems like they gave the schools $4 billion for technology to counter COVID.
Well,
Right,
I mean,
$4 billion.
you didn't go to public school in New York. You need a lot of Javelin missiles there. Oh, you did go to
Yeah,
public
no,
school in New
I
York.
did go. I went to public
Yeah.
school in New York. Are you
That's
kidding?
why they
I
need
went to
Javelin
Bronx High School of
missiles.
Science. Yeah,
Right.
Bronx High School of Science is public school. You got to take a test to get in there. Now you probably have to take a COVID test to get in there, which is
You probably have to have a bulletproof vest to get in there.
yeah. So go to the next slide. Go to the next slide I have in my deck there. Yeah. So how do we really feel about Ukraine, Mr. President? Right? How do we really feel? In other words, there's this narrative about how horrific it is, and Putin is da, 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 da. And then at the end of the day, let's go to the next slide. How much money do we send to Ukraine to help out with the problem?
It's a ton, 1.3 billion. I mean, it's nothing compared to 130 billion, but there's just too many billions being thrown around. We're in debt. It's like going and buying a car when you have 50,000 in credit card debt.
I'm simply saying, in other words, if Ukraine was one child and the getting kids back safely in school was your other child, which child do you appear to love more? In other words, right? So in other words, let's say you've got two kids, right? You've got two kids. Yeah. One kid, you buy a Ferrari, and the other one, you get a used Pinto from 1971. Yeah. Does it appear that you love one more than the other? I'm not trying to be materialistic or anything, but it seems that America speaks with money. And so when you commit $130 billion to safely reopen the schools, and you send 1% of that to Ukraine, that tells me how much you care. That tells me how much you care.
Maurice says they're doing their laundry. I think she's right.
Basically, I mean, it's what it comes down to. Scroll down 2 more slides. You'll see, look at the amount of money they're spending on this school nonsense. This was the title page, but the next page has all this detail. We looked at this a week or so ago. They spent $60 billion, right? Avoiding firing people.
That doesn't even mean they're not going to have layoffs. They're just going to avoid them and then do it.
Yeah, and $7 billion, go down a little bit, like 2/3 down, went to the digital divide. Now, this is about COVID.
What is that?
This is
the
digital divide, Wi-Fi hotspots and devices, $7 billion. So if you're going to, and counselors, and we both agree that the psychologists are a good idea. I don't know if $10 billion worth of psychologists is, it's like the entire
excessive.
Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, the entire